Okay, so now starting off with this memory game, I'm going to start off first explaining the HTML part. So as you can see, I've got the default sort of layout of the doc type declaring that this is a HTML document. I've got the HTML, so say this is a HTML. Inside there I've put a language tag. I've said the language and I've also said the location. And then after that I got my head tag, and within my head tag I've got the title, which is over here, as you can see, memory game. So it puts the title of, or the name I should say, of the tab, and that's what goes in the title. And then after that I've just got metadata to give more detail on this page, so for SEOs and stuff like that, and also for myself, so a reminder of when I made the game and such. Next we go on to the link tag. So the link tag is basically me linking my CSS, so my styling for this HTML document. So I've linked it the correct way and I've wrote the file name, and then I've also done my script tag here. This is just not the normal way they would recommend to put your JavaScript, but this is a way, if you do want to do a cheat, you can put it in your head tag, but you do have to use either defer or async, which makes it defer after it's loaded the HTML, or async after it's loaded the HTML, because otherwise you would have errors. So this isn't really recommended. Usually you would just put this at the end where your body tag is. Usually that's where you'll put it, but I've just put it here for now. Next I have my Fab icon. So that's basically, if you look here, it's the icon on my tab. So I've just got an image of what I've wanted there, and that's how you literally put your image there. Instead of, it will just show like I think it's just like a world sort of icon by default. So this is the image that I've put there to link with the memory game. So you use the link. I've described it as an icon, type image, and then I've put a link so it knows what I want to do with it. Okay, and that's my head tag done. Next we have my body tag. So in my body tag, it's got all my details in there. So since it's got all my details in there, I've started off with the H1 for the heading. So that's basically my heading of memory game, as you can see here. Then I have my subtitle, which I'll just refer to it as, but I've used a P tag, which has the text match up the correct colors together to win the game. So it's just basically instructions to the user. Then I've used a div tag, and within my div tag I've used like a class, and this is for my styling, and so I can design it or style it the way I want it to be, and I'll go into that in the CSS video. But I've used a div tag to put my contents of the first section in, which is basically the game info, which I've classed it as the first part as the game info. So within the game info container, I've actually put another container, or another div I should say, called game info, and within that div tag or div element, I've put basically time, so the timer, the matches, the flips, and then also I've put those within divs as well. Okay, and I've also used classes, IDs, so that I can style them and reference them when I do JavaScript as well, to make the page interactive. I've set default a timer here, a default timer here. This can always change, but if I change it here, I have to also change it in my JavaScript, so I have to note that. So this was the default time that I gave it, 175 seconds. For my matches, I've automatically made it start on 0, and the same with my flips. As you've noticed, within my div of my game info, I've used a span to put the number of the flips and the matches, so that, as you can see, when the span is used, it doesn't do any line breaks, it just puts it directly next to it. So that's the reason why I use the span. So that's it for the first section. After that section there, which is the game info, I've got basically whether the user, or the player I should say, wins or loses the game. So by default, I've put congratulations, you win. I've given it the ID of winner, right? So that's my default one. So when I get to JavaScript, I would have to do some some changes, so that if they lose, based on if the timer runs out, it will change to, as it says here, you lose, try again. Okay, so next we have a section tag that I've used, and I've put a class of grid container. So this is basically the container of all my cards and the colors that it has. So I've literally put this within a section tag for this to be a section of the page also, but this to be the section of the actual game, right? And then within it, I've kind of given it sections. So as you can see, I've put 4 divs in sets of 4. So in total, that should be 16. So 4, 8, 12, 16. Okay, and then I'm just going to go through one div because they're pretty much all the same. So for one div, I've given, for example, the first div, the data color of red. So this is just to give it an easier way of me specifying the color for each card of what I want it to be, right? So this is the reason why I use this, is because when I went to do my JavaScript, I found it hard to not even select, but match up my colors and make it do things that I wanted it to do. So using the data attribute made it easier for me to use when I came to do my JavaScript, instead of just using a class for red. The data attribute helped a lot more. So continuing with this first div, so I gave it the data color attribute, and then I classified what color each one was, and then I gave each one of them a class, whether it was going to be a card. So I gave it the class of card, I gave it its color, and that came useful for when I was styling. So as you can see, it's got a color, and then a card back. So this is the back of the card. As you can see, it has not the same normal average color. It has a picture. I think it is. I use a picture which kind of blends in and matches with the background. And then I gave each div on click function to do a flip card event. And then also I've given each div numbers. So as you saw at the beginning of the game, it was easy for the player to identify each card because it had a number. Once they flipped it, the number disappeared, so they would have to remember the number. This was just an easier mechanism that I use for the memory game to help people with their memory to memorize the numbers, also as well as where the colors were. It was to help them, pretty much. That's the reason why I used it. Next, I've done it for each div, and I've separated it to make it easier, so it kind of looks easy to look at. And then after that, I've just simply put the footer, which is the bottom part here, and in there I've just put my copyright, and that's about it, and made it a fixed position so that when well, you can't really scroll, but I haven't made this a scrolling feature, but if it was to scroll, it'll be fixed at the bottom of the page. And that's pretty much it for the HTML. It's pretty straightforward. So when I go into CSS and JavaScript now, I'll come to explain why I use IDs, classes, how I've styled it, and how I've made this interactive. So now I will move on to the CSS.